Hey, it's Nathan with episode number 24 of the Tech Brews Chat series. Today is all about serverless computing. Here's the thing about serverless. Those who understand it technically often miss the mark on connecting the dots to where it leads back to the business impact. And for those of you who don't know anything about serverless at all, well, you're in the right place. The best analogy I've seen explaining serverless computing comes from a user on dev community called Cosworth K&M. Weird name, but cool way to explain it. Goes a little bit like this. Imagine that you have a delicious bread recipe that has been passed down to your family for generations and you are ready to share it with the world. But you have no idea how you're going to make time for baking it because you're already pressed for time as it is. Not to mention, if you want to bake a loaf of bread with your family's recipe, you're gonna have to buy some eggs, you're gonna have to use some flour, and maybe there's gonna be some other starches or baking soda or whatever else you use for bread. Not to mention, if we think of each one of these resources as a different shop, you'd have to go to each one of those shops, source the resources that you need for that specific bread recipe, bring it back, all to make one loaf of bread. And that's it. This is how building conventional websites and applications works. Now, let's imagine that you outsource your bread recipe to an industrial third-party baker. What the industrial baker does is take your family's recipe, sources each of the ingredients on their own, brings it back, mixes it all together, and gives you however many loaves you want. Not to mention, they give you the bread and you can sell it as your own. This is serverless computing. You're either paying the baker for one component of bread making, maybe it's mixing these two ingredients together to get you to one step further to the end, which is called function as a service, or maybe you want the baker to take care of the entire process, which is called backend as a service. Both FAS and BAS are all rolled up into the serverless computing concept. Now let's imagine your bread recipe blows up and you have to make 1 million loaves of bread to address the demand. Usually you'd be freaking out because you don't have that many ovens. I mean, how are you gonna make 1 million loaves of bread? But with the serverless or third-party industrial baker way of making your bread, you just give them your recipe and they worry about the rest. If you haven't caught already, the recipe is your back-end code, okay? This is yours. But when it comes to making the bread, you don't have to worry about how they make it or how they're going to scale. That is their problem. You only have to pay for the amount of units that you order, okay? So for those 1 million units of bread, loaves of bread, you pay a fee and that's it. So let's put this all in context. You write the code or you have your recipe, you give it to the serverless provider, they give you the results that you need to build your application, and you're off to the races. Unlike conventional methods, you don't have to worry about the time it takes to go source the ingredients, or the amount of ovens you'll need, or the time it's gonna take to bake, or if you can scale for 1 million loaves. You don't need to worry about that. Translating that to back-end speak, you don't need to take the time and the money to keep your back-end resources running. The serverless provider is the one who worries about the scaling and the running of code. All you have to focus on is making sure that you or your team has that grandma's recipe or that amazing big idea that you can change the world with. At their core, developers are meant to be building and thinking big with the next app that your business or company is going to release. They shouldn't be managing the infrastructure. When developers spend more time managing the infrastructure, it means it's less time for them to build the next big thing. So let's put some math with this. If you have a graph right here where you have the cost of time and money and you have the rising demand, you have things staged into the development environment before it's released and then in production once you've released it to the market. In the traditional sense, if you're releasing the app and you're doing some development here and you're guessing to make sure you have enough resources, when you hit production, you're just gonna have to keep going up and up and up with the cost of time and resources to make sure you're meeting the demand for your customer base. But let's think about it in the serverless computing context. When the minimum viable product or the first beta release is put in front of your customers, your team won't be having to worry about if you can scale with your customer growth because you're just paying for what you use at the time. It keeps costs on the money side and the time resources side low. So you're saying, okay, this is cool, Nathan. So where do I even start if I'm looking to get into serverless computing? Number one, if you're building an app, then you might want to look at a serverless strategy. Or number two, if you have a task that you need to complete, but you're unsure of the amount of resources that's going to take to run that process or to run that task in your system, that's a great way to put those resources and risk back on a serverless computing provider. Serverless computing at its core is focused on minimizing and mitigating risk and offloading the unnecessary tasks so your team can get back and focus on what they do best, thinking big and going far. So you're thinking, all right, Nathan, I think I want to try this serverless computing for myself. Awesome. There's a lot of options out there. And if you're truly wondering where MongoDB fits in the picture, yeah, we got you covered. But I'm going to do less talking and more showing of that part. So click the link below and spin up your own sandbox cluster and have at it. Will literally take you 4 minutes, tops. And we got our little brew of the week of Russell's Reserve. Russell's Reserve is really good. Kentucky bourbon, got a ton of flavor with just enough bite to keep you coming back for more. Really satisfying all in all at the end. Hopefully like this episode. So guys, I will see you next week. Comment below, give it a like, give it a share. Hope you liked it. Cheers.